certainly we all are making this decision, understanding that Ukraine is a sovereign territory, and you don't want powers invading each other and without the sanctions. So Anguilla has signed on with the United Kingdom as part of the United Kingdom overseas territories, and we will bear some burden for that. But as I said, the discussions are ongoing, how that will impact us and how it will be mitigated.
Relates to GST economic resilience. I know in a previous interview, you made mention, you gave some numbers in terms of the GST being implemented later this year. Government supposed to make approximately somewhere between $20 million, and then next year full stream, 70-something million dollars. I'm just wondering if that would put government on a good path, and would it be possible for civil servants to have their previous salaries reinstated? Before the pre-crisis, when our salaries were reduced.
Yeah, I don't understand the question specifically.
Okay, in terms of government, it will be a revenue generator in terms of government being able to have more revenue. So I'm just wondering if possible, if civil servants would be able to, have some of their salaries reinstated, even unfreeze the increments.
Well, certainly, all of these things will be discussed as we go forward. But as far as I remember, the reductions were set as were statutory at that time, made statutory. There are certain salaries that, and the deferred payments, they are being paid as we go along. We paid half of the deficit this last December, and we intend to pay the rest of that. But in terms of incremental or raises in salaries, those will be taken into consideration as the financial position improves.
Honourable Premier, you talked about with the thing with Ukraine, and what is expected from these small islands, especially who do business with Russia. Were there any thing putting in place, since you're going to be losing so much from those businesses? Are there anything in place to help these small islands who are going to agree with these sanctions to mitigate their financial loss?
As I just said, in discussions with the minister and meetings last week, virtually, and in meetings in person, these will be analyzed and evaluated as to what the losses will entail, and then will be discussed on a case-by-case basis how they can be mitigated.
Webster, you mentioned during the visit of MP Millen that she had traveled to, I think, from Blowing Point to Sandagram. Yes. Any consideration or any talk was given to the security aspect of it? I know you didn't mention that. Probably you choose not to, or maybe security.
No, I can't say everything that I know and think in my head, but certainly that was one of the reasons for the boat trip also, was to look at border security and how porous our borders are. And so those are discussions we're also having about how to protect from illegal entry, and those are that was one of the major discussions. Thank you for jogging my old memory on that. I just had a birthday, so I'm getting old.
No, mine was earlier in the month too, so Another thing that sort of curious that it come up here now, but I think I should still ask it. You said that you had discussions with the minister regarding the implementation of GST and how things were going. I think
correct.
Yes. Did you tell her so that a very large percentage of the Anguillan population were not in favor of the GST at this time?
The minister does watch the social media and
No, I
the
just ask you, you had a discussion with her, I'm just asking you if you shared that. You are the leader of government business, the GST was discussed, the implementation is 1st July 2022. I'm just asking you as Chief Minister, Premier of Anguilla, whether or not you indicated to the lady that there are a large percentage of Anguillians are not in favor of the implementation of the goods and services tax at this time.
As I said, the minister is aware of these things.
Okay. The other questions had to do with security, as relates to Russian businesses doing business in Anguilla. We're going to be impacted one way or the other, most likely negative. Could you tell us, I think the question was asked the last time you were here, could you tell us whether or not so that there are by now actually Russian businesses in Anguilla? Because we only have one local commercial bank, and whether the banks would be impacted at this time by, if anybody from Russia, Russian connection, doing business in Anguilla.
None that we have found so far. But those are ongoing. The register has been looked at. Now we are looking at the different suppliers, those who do financial services in Anguilla, to see if there are any they're doing manual checks also, but none that we know so far.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Thank you. Any other questions at this time for me as Minister of Finance? Or if not, you have a question? No? I'll turn over to the Minister for Home Affairs for a quick update, and then Minister for Infrastructure and Tourism.
Thank you very much, Premier. Members of the media, you will recall over many press conferences I have been highlighting the need for persons in Anguilla to regularize their status. I think it was coming a little annoying at times, but there was a reason why I kept emphasizing that. Because as the days pass by, we are discovering that more and more persons in Anguilla are having issues with their status. You know, during the COVID lockdown, a lot of things were suspended. Things are getting back to normal now. They're getting back to the normal way of doing things. The borders are opened. The hotels and other businesses are up and running. And so the Labor Department has begun the process once again of inspections. This is a normal procedure carried out on a regular basis, where officials from the Labor Department go into various businesses across the island. It's not only the hotel sector, it is businesses in general, to ascertain and make sure that persons who are employed, they are employed legally under the laws of Anguilla. And so the Labor Department would have served the notice on all business establishments across Anguilla that they are about to recommence their inspection process. And the various businesses now obviously are going into their personal records and ensuring that their records of their employees are up to date. And we are finding out quite a few of these employees, their status is not up to date. And we have become aware of that. Some persons have already reached out to us, and we are helping them. And I want to encourage workers across the sector and employers as well, where these issues are cropping up, to come into the Labor Department and Immigration Department so that we can try to get these matters sorted out. So that's an appeal I've been making over the past weeks, and I'm making it again today. We operate by laws, we operate under the labor law, and these things are important, and we're encouraging all workers to ensure that their status is up to date. It is not about the government of Anguilla, the Labor Department, seeking to fire anybody or send anybody home. We are just seeking to regularize, under the law, the employment status of persons. The second point I want to make very quickly is, again, in the theme of getting back to normal, the Labor Department has re-energized its Facebook page in terms of its labor tips. And if you look at a Facebook page, they recently put up a tip. I'm just pointing it out here. And it speaks about work permit holders are only permitted to work with a person, business, or organization who has applied for their work permit as employer. They are not permitted to work with any other person, business, or organization, and doing so is unlawful under the Labor Relations Act 2018 and can lead to revocation of the work permit. And so I've worked with a copy of the labor law, and I want to quote to you the exact sections that speak to this. So I have a copy of it. This is available on the Government of Anguilla's website. Section 164, Principles Governing Work Permits. The minister is responsible for ensuring that belongers of Anguilla are engaged in gainful employment as a paramount consideration to all matters pertaining to work permits, and the administration and interpretation of this part shall be guided by this principle. 2, in considering an application for the grant of a work permit, the minister shall be guided by the necessity to maintain high levels of employment throughout the island, and firstly among persons who are belongers of Anguilla, and secondly among persons who are lawfully resident on the island. 3, the ministry recognizes the invaluable contribution to the development of Anguilla by persons who engage in employment on work permits, and the ministry, through a balancing act, shall develop policies that attract and foster the talent of persons who are non-belongers, and the administration of any labor legislation shall be guided by this principle. And I just want to forward quickly to section 173, where it speaks about the grant of a work permit and the employment contract. 1731, subject to subsection 2, the minister may grant a work permit for a term that the minister considers necessary, but any term shall not exceed 1 year. And subsection 2 says, the minister may by regulations determine the duration of a work permit according to the category of work permit or the kind of business, but the duration of any work permit shall not exceed 2 years. You recall that recently we would have done this in the financial services sector, where we are allowing for up to 2 years. And the last section I want to quote is section 175, where a change of employer is contemplated. The minister may vary the work permit if the employer and the prospective employer agree, or B, cancel the work permit. So in short, if you have a work permit working for Mr. Thompson, you cannot on that work permit work for Miss Jane or anybody else. Your work permit only entitles you to work for that person, and anybody else you work for under the law, it is illegal, and that work permit may be terminated. Thank you. Any questions?
With that being said, Mr. Minister, so how is the Social Security or the Social Security coping with that? Because I think they are having challenges with that.
With what, sir?
With what persons working for more than one agency or workplace?
It is illegal. It is highly illegal, and wherever we are uncovering that, we put a stop to it. But under the law, it is illegal.
Mr. Hodge, last week, and we know you dealt with the issue relating to Aurora, and there's something floating around on social media regarding the director of the security at that property and the way he deals with staff. Are you aware of the situation?
At the Labor Department, we get reports of issues within the sector, and we deal with them as they come in. As a matter of fact, as you know, we have started a series of visits to the various properties, and part of those visits includes a discussion with the work permit holders as to expectations of conduct and performance. So we are going through the entire sector having these discussions.
Mr. Minister, from the time
Yes,
I
sir.
worked at Social Security for a number of years, I know we all had a problem with employees and employers relating to employees having to work for more than one employer. We know for a fact that that is illegal according to the law. I got two questions. The first one, if a minister issues a work permit for an employee to work for an employer, he or she would know that the work that has been, the work permit that is issued will not cover an entire year. Why issue the work permit?
I don't understand your question, sir.
Wow. Wow. If a work permit, a number of work permits have been issued to people in Anguilla, this has been going on for years, to an employer, for an employee to work for him or her. The work that this person is supposed to undertake cannot last a whole year. So they probably could finish that job in maybe 3-4 months. But they had a
Okay.
1-year contract. And now they 9 months, they're just hanging around here doing nothing. They go and work with somebody else.
No, Mr. Richardson, there's a process for each and every work permit. There's a very clear process that speaks to the scope of the work that is going to be undertaken, the qualifications of the person needed. So there's a very clear process that accompanies each work permit. You have classes of work permits. We grant temporary permits for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year. So it is not that every work permit is granted for a year. It depends on the scope of work. And because this is clearly outlined where the application comes in, the Labor Department has a very clear understanding of what is the scope of work that is going to be undertaken, and the work permit is therefore granted for that period of time. So as I said, it could be for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, up a year.
So what is the penalty for an employer employing somebody who isn't on his, he or she don't have a work permit for him or her to work with them? Is there a penalty?
It's against the law.
What's the penalty? We don't know it's against the law, because I've been hearing that for years, but I had never heard anybody being charged, whether or not it's just a policy along with what is said to be against the law, but the law have to have teeth. So if there is no law, if there's no
Yes.
penalty, then they just get a
The
slap
Labor,
on
the Labor Relations Act speaks to the revocation of permits for those persons who are found engaging in that practice, yes.
But in terms of whether or not penalties should be attached, that could be probably attached to create a deterrent. Because if I got somebody working for me and I send him out to work with somebody else after 3 months because I don't have enough work to keep them here, and somebody else employ him for another 6 months, a year, he's working illegally, he has employed him illegally. By the end of the day, when the department finds out, all they do is just revoke his work permit and send him out.
Right.
So if a penalty was attached to that, then the employers would be very careful not to hire people on those
Yes.
conditions.
So let me quote for you offenses under section 180. So it speaks to an employer or any other person who contravenes this part, commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000. B2, a person who makes a false statement in an application for a work permit or work permit renewal, whether in the prescribed forms or in response to any queries put to him in the course of an investigation during the work permit application process, commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000. So there are penalties under the law, Mr. Richardson,
Okay.
and for persons who
And
contribute.
then I guess where the government is concerned, I don't know who's going to be responsible for ensuring that the penalties that are there are meted out to these people. Else it will continue. It's been going on for years, Ken.
I can assure you, sir, that under this administration, under this labor minister, we are aggressively pursuing several amendments to the Labor Relations Act that are designed to strengthen the legislation. And certainly, I take the point that you are making, and part of that, sir, is strengthened to the point that we begin to put some teeth and put people before the court system, yes.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
While I have the mic, Dr. Webster, I know you turn it over to Ken. Could you share anything with us here, or by extension, person listening, whether or not the Anguilla Progressive Movement candidate for District Number 2, who contested the last election in 2020, has tendered his resignation from the party. I heard that just a while ago, so I thought you might be the best person to ask that question to while I'm here. Beg pardon? You just hear it?
I'd rather not answer that question at this time. When I get more information, we can deal with that. But thank you very much.
Thanks for the information, Elkin. Good afternoon. As you know, the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal is progressing well. We toured the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal on Monday, and a significant amount of work has been done. They're preparing to affix the other parts of the roof, and we're very pleased. Plastering have already commenced on the first floor, so we're very pleased in the work that is going on at the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal. On the Carteret Boulevard, as you know, starting this morning, a section of the Carteret Boulevard has been opened for traffic, and it leads from the runabout at the Wall Blake over to FedEx office. And this is to facilitate the work that commenced today on the airport road. As you know, we are redeveloping the airport road. It was a hazard for the better part of 50 years, and it's one of our gateways, so it was important that we do something while we had the opportunity to do something about rehabilitating that road. And this morning around 10 a.m. The excavation of that road commenced, and it's moving along quite rapidly. So we're very pleased with that. We hope to have that road in use within the next 6 to 8 weeks. So that is a hope. The Carteret Boulevard, as you know, it's about 90% completed. I know Elkin is on that road every day, but it's about 90% completed. Parts of the roundabout is already completed. The last roundabout is completed. The sidewalks in the vicinity of the Social Security junction still have to be completed. A major pouring was done today. By the end of this week, that section will be completed. Of course, you'll have to have some curing time. So we don't expect to have the entire road open for vehicular traffic until maybe the very first week in April. We are thinking about the first, but there are superstitions around the 1st of April, so most likely it won't be the 1st of April. As you know, American Airlines will commence its daily flights on the 5th of Tuesday, the 5th of April, although Monday is a regularly scheduled flight. So I would say Monday, April the 4th, we'll have daily flights into Anguilla, into the Clayton J. Lloyd International via American Airlines. Flights will leave Miami at 10:30 and will arrive in Anguilla at 1:50 p.m. and leave Anguilla at 2:10 p.m. and arrive in the United States at 5:30 p.m. And we're very pleased about that. As you can see, wherever you go around this island, it is extremely busy. Wherever you go, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a construction site. And that bodes well as it relates to what we wanted to do when we came to office on July 1st, 2020. It was the goal of this administration to jumpstart an economy that was put to death, put to rest. And I think that we have been extremely successful in doing so. So that is a testament of the leadership of this administration and the trajectory in which Dr. Webster wanted to take us. From the very outset, he made it clear that he wanted to jumpstart this economy because we are not a nation of beggars. And so we are moving quickly ahead to create a type of economy that Anguilla and Anguillians can be proud of, and Anguillians in the diaspora can look to return home. And that is the type of sustainable economy that we want to create. Thank you.
Let's, Dr. Hughes, to the paving of that road. You didn't indicate where the funding is coming from.
Well, God always provided manna. But in this case, it's a combination of funds from the United Kingdom government and funds from the Ministry of Finance, directly through the Ministry of Finance. So that is where it's being paid for.
Fair enough. The other questions had to do with Cape Air. Is my understanding, I know why all the questions coming to me, is my understanding that Cape Air has stopped flying as of last week?
Yeah, they suspended their flights as of last week.
And-
They will
and-
recommence their flights later on once they start out their pilot issues. They have been a huge issue in a number of airlines. Recently, we saw Delta and other airlines in the U.S. having the very same issues, and they too suffer from the same issues. So until that is worked out, they have suspended their flights, but they have every intention to restore flights into Anguilla this year, 2022.
So then it would be fair to tell the public that it has nothing to do with subsidies then?
Well, the government of Anguilla is not and never was or will be in a position to provide subsidies to any airline company. We have not provided any subsidies. We have made it clear to any aviation company that we have spoken to that the government of Anguilla will not guarantee seats, will not provide any sort of financial subsidies. And that has been clear from the outset, and that also includes our initial discussions to return Cape Air to Anguilla. And they have not asked for any subsidies either.
Okay. I had two more questions. I don't know if I could ask them, but it's going to be within your ministry. One has to do with Anglic, with regards to the meeting that was supposed to be held yesterday. It is my understanding, so, that the last published audit for Anglic was in 2019. There was none public since that, other than the in-house audits that have been done. The government of Anguilla has the largest number of shares in Anglic, and that you could have gone to Anglic and request those audits without having to call a general meeting, or without having a general meeting being called, whoever called it. The question that is to be asked then, whether or not there were other ulterior motives, quote unquote, behind calling that meeting. And if it isn't, then why didn't you go to Anglic and obtain those financials?
I will say this, I have never been to Anglic to obtain any financials since becoming minister with the responsibility for Anglic. I've never engaged in any day-to-day operations. I don't think that that is a prudent use of my time, and it is not something that I will do going forward. But what I can say is that in asking for financials, we have been able to get some financial information from the acting CEO, who is also the chief financial officer, and that is where it is. But it was a special sitting. It was a special sitting to bring not only the major shareholder, but all of the shareholders up to speed as it relates to the fiscal position of Anglic. Because prior to the proposed load shedding earlier this year, I think it was, no, late last year, the load shedding, we were of the view that Anglic was in a pretty strong financial position. And once we sat down with a few members of the board, we realized that Anglic was in dire financial straits. This is something that we were not aware of. So it is important not only for them to come and sit around the table and tell us what Anglic's position is, but also to allow all of the shareholders, all of those persons who took their hard-earned monies and sometimes their pensions and gratuities to purchase shares in Anglic to know what the financial position is. And in the interest of transparency and good governance and accountability, we thought that it would be right, it would be prudent for us to have a special sitting so that all of the shareholders will be aware of what the fiscal position of Anglic is.
I know when the...
I'd just like to add to that.
Sure.
With your, so we had informal meetings with members of the board of Anglic, including the chairman and others. And we were then told about the financial position. So I wrote a letter to, when we were apprised that there would be the possibility of load shedding, I wrote a letter to Anglic as the leader of government business, and we are responsible, 40% of the shares of Anglic are controlled by the government of Anguilla, 16% by Social Security, which comes under the auspices of the Minister of Finance, and 23% by NCBA, combination of NB and CCB, which comes under the Minister of Finance. So I asked that we be given a copy of the financials. And also, we wanted to know the monthly, cash flow, because we were told that the cash flow at that time that they only had, they had like $700 and something thousand EC, and then 502,000 of that was paid out on an invoice. And they were asking the government of Anguilla for money. So we felt that as shareholders, we should know what the position is. Up to this point, I have not received any specific financials. Using goodwill and good faith, we were then told what the fuel obligations were up until the 26th of December. Given those numbers, again, not formally, we took it upon ourselves, because Anglic is a vital asset, and we then had the Water Corporation and S.A.F.E give up $4 million to Anglic back in December, and this money came from central government. And so we still feel that we should be entitled to seeing what the financials are, because we want to know what the state of the company is. We still have not received those. And so this is why the special shareholders meeting was called, so that we can get an idea of Anglic's financials, where it is. This company is essential to this country. This is owned by the people of Anguilla 79%, because the bank is owned by the people of Anguilla. Social Security is a statutory body owned by the people of Anguilla. The government of Anguilla is owned by the people of Anguilla. 79% of this company, and we cannot get, up to this point, we cannot get formal in terms of the cash flow, and we should have access to that. Now, in terms of the audited financials, we've seen the ones up to 2019, as you mentioned. We know the auditor, and so we still feel that we are entitled to that information as the major shareholder. This meeting would have allowed the minor shareholders, who we've been told may feel that they're being suppressed by the major shareholder, we give them the opportunity to be there. Now, from what I heard, there was not a quorum because they didn't have enough shareholders present. We still feel that we're entitled to this information if the company continues to put the squeeze on the central government that has met its obligations to the company in terms of paying. The company also just recently raised the fuel surcharge to 45 cents. Now, we know legislatively they're allowed to do that, but again, that discussion, we could have discussed this last night at the shareholders meeting, but again, so we still feel, and there are remedies for this that will be looked into. So thank you for the question. I appreciate you bringing it to the attention of the people of Anguilla.
Sure. Now, back to Dr. Hayden. As relates to the 2015 election promise and campaign, and prior to that, I know that during 2010 to 2015, there was a team in here, and they were dealing with rebranding of Anguilla from Tranquility Wrapped in Blue to Seen as Believing. I spent a few hours at the Library and Resource Center when Margaret Brito and her team presented a whole gamut of things, and she stated her reason why we shouldn't have Tranquility Wrapped in Blue. We should have Seen as Believing. But then after...
You missed Our Island, Your Home.
Yes. Oh, I missed that too? Okay. But this part I'm going to bring up now, I didn't miss. This one is that it is out there that the job wasn't completed and the monies were paid. And people are saying, ever since the 2015 election, they were saying that the lady should pay back the monies. Could you share anything with us as whether or not Margaret Brito and her team had gotten all the money for the exercise, and that now that exercise hasn't been completed, if she's entitled to pay back the money? I would need mine.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, thank
you very much for that question, Elkin. I'm always happy when you bring the hard questions. First and foremost, Tranquility Wrapped in Blue was hatched by Mr. David Carty in the very wee hours of the early 80s. And it remained as our tagline up until 2006. And in 2006, under the stewardship of Ms. Donna Banks, the tagline was changed from Tranquility Wrapped in Blue. Is feeling is believing, the Anguillan experience. So when it was rebranded by the Brito Agency in 2014, Tranquility Wrapped in Blue was a distant bygone, but it still is used because, you know, we are a tranquil country and we are wrapped in blue. And there was also the whole moniker of find your shade of blue. So as you rightfully said, there was a private consultation and then there was a public consultation in which we all attended. I believe, Premier, at the time you also attended at the Teachers Resource Center, where the new possible tagline was hatched. But that new possible hatched tagline was a number of taglines that was presented to the closed group of members of the Anguilla Hotel and Tourism Association and Tourism, and they said, you know what, this one was the one that we felt closer to, which was My Island, Your Home, My Island, Our Island, Your Home, something along that line. Now I want to say this. The Brito Agency was never paid for the rebranding of Anguilla, never paid. The job was completed and was never paid. And so the misinformation that I hear coming around is purely political in nature. And I had this conversation with the former Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Cardigan Connor, just today. And we were speaking about the fact that for 10 years prior to 2010, there was a particular car service that the United Front administration under Osborne Fleming used in New York for CTO. And between 2010 and 2015, the same car service continued. But it was a huge issue because now it was Hayden, Prince Hayden, as they say, driving on the limousine in New York. And then from 2015 to 2019, 2020, you have to take it out because of the COVID year, Mr. Cardigan Connor and members of the United Front used the very same car service that was around being utilized for 20 years, 15 of those years under the Anguilla United Front. But for political reasons, it was wrong for the AUM, but was fine for the AUF. And I want to also say this in places on record. The Brito Agency that was selected for Anguilla's global brand specialist and public relations was not selected by either Hubert Hughes, Hayden Hughes, or any of us. That agency was selected by the Anguilla Marketing Alliance. So who was the Anguilla Marketing Alliance at the time, back in 2011? It comprised of the chairman of the Anguilla Tourist Board at the time, Mr. Eustace Kishard, the director of tourism at the time, Ms. Candice Niles, persons like Ms. Sue Ricketts, a veteran hotelier, and the person who created the names Cap Chuluka and Maluhana and Anna Kuhana, and who was the person, along with her husband, who brought 5-star luxury tourism to Anguilla, and a number of other persons. They were the ones who went through the request for proposal because when we came to office in 2010, we didn't believe that the practice that was being the prevailing practice of just granting somebody a contract, giving a friend a contract, was the right thing to do. That it should go through some sort of rigorous process. It wasn't procurement, but was similar to procurement. You apply, you present it, and when the Brito Agency presented, there were a number of other persons that presented, and 3 were narrowed down, and this one was selected. And this one was selected by the Anguilla Tourist Board through the Anguilla Marketing Alliance, which the minister had nothing to do with. The parliamentary secretary, which was I at the time, had nothing to do with. Now, when that was selected, at the same time, we were moving towards developing the Anguilla St. Martin Dock. The permanent secretary of tourism, Mr. Marvin Foster Rogers, wrote to the Anguilla Tourist Board and said that the contract between the Brito Agency and the Anguilla Tourist Board could not be consummated because the funding, the subvention, could not pay both the contract and develop the Anguilla Tourist Board at the time. So it was followed. So even though it was followed, work was continued to be done pro bono for a significant amount of time. So when it comes to all the politics and ridiculous statements that is being made, I long for the opportunity. As a matter of fact, I even asked the PAC if they can put me on the stand. And Ms. Brito have also offered herself to fly into Anguilla at her own expense and sit on the stand. But they said no. So there's nothing to hide. When it comes to this administration, there's nothing to hide, because even before and I want to say this. The former administration, to the tourist board, went back to the policy and the practice of granting contracts without any tender process whatsoever. Went back to that very same practice. We have come into office, we have cut significantly our spend on international marketing, and we will have gone back to the practice of tendering for every contract that comes through the Anguilla Tourist Board or any other statutory body. Any other statutory body. That includes S.A.F.E, that includes water, that even includes Anglic, so that everybody have a fair chance without any politician granting a contract to their friends and then diverting money back into their pockets or whatever else they do. So this administration have been very transparent, very clean, and very above board. And as you can see, all our hands are on the table and not below the table. Thank you.
Just to go back to the airport road, can you tell us the estimated cost? Can you tell us what surface is going to be used there and who is doing the work, please?
Well, if there's one area that I micromanage, that is roads. I know where every nail is and every screw is. So the estimated cost is $4.5 million. No, sorry, 450,000 US dollars. Sorry, my bad. 450,000 US dollars. 450, yes, 450,000 US dollars. $450,000. You know, I was still hype about the yellow shirt questions, but $450,000. The contractor that is doing that work is a variation, and it's on Superior Industrial Equipment, Superior Industrial, Calvert Junior Fleming. He's doing the excavation, as I said before. It's already started. They're moving along nicely. I was there this morning when they started, and I saw a number of vehicles still coming that way. So I think we need to do a little bit more in terms of notifying the motorists that where the diversion points are. And the contractors that are doing the Carteret Boulevard, the Valley Main Road, is going to continue along that road. And so what the road is going to look like, it's going to be concrete surface. It's going to be a concrete surface. It's going to have sidewalks on the left-hand side going east, if you know directions in Anguilla. But it won't have a sidewalk on the other side of the street because, as you know, we are planning to redevelop the whole airport area, and all of that area will be taken into consideration under the airport development plan. Well, we're looking for contributions. Contributions are welcome.
The new jetty at Sandy Ground, I know I asked about it before. You said it had to mature or whatever. Is there a date for it?
There is not a specific date right now, but I can say that right now they're doing the security fencing and all of the work for the offices and so forth that's being conducted at the moment.
Being done.
Mr. Juan Richardson, he won the contract to do the security fencing and all of the works around the area.
Following on from that, there's a vast amount of material that came when they were doing the piles. Huge amount on the Well Road, another large amount at the site. So my question is there any use for that material?
You're talking about the dredge sand?
Yes.
Yeah, it has been used. What we'll be doing with some of that is if you drive past the water authority, you'll see a few piles over there, because previously when they were laying the pipes, and I think we spoke about this earlier, when they were laying the pipes for the water network around the island, they just threw the rubble back onto the pipes, and it created a number of pinhole leaks, and this is why this 60% of our water is being lost in leaks. So we are using that material to bed the pipes now, and then you place it on the pipes, and then you can put the materials on without having to impact those pipes. So that's one of the usages that we have been using. We also, I believe we have sold some of it as well, and that is what is in stock still. But at some point, you know, we will be able to rid ourselves of all of it.
So it can't actually be used for construction in any way?
No. It's almost like mud.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
It's
almost
a cross
like mud.
between sand and mud.
Yeah, and it actually compacts hard. It compacts hard, which is a good thing, because if you drive down there, you'll find that even the sand that is along the shoreline where the sand ground pier is, it's very compact.
Mr. Hughes, could you, I believe many people were surprised to know that, you were doing the airport road. You said it's a mixture of funds from the British and government. Could you tell us about your talks with Ms. Millen? Is there perhaps any opportunity for future funding for other projects?
Firstly, I just want to say, a lot of people may have come to a surprise, but I don't believe in premature announcements. I don't believe in making announcements, because I can recall back in 2015 when a former Minister of Infrastructure said the Valley Main Road will be finished by September of 2017. And there were no attempts even to design the Valley Main Road. So when we make announcements, it's something that is definitive and it's something that is sure. So the announcement was made yesterday because we know today it will be done. But if it was made a week ago or 2 weeks ago, it would have still been up in the air. So it is prudent that we make announcements that we know are definitive. So the discussions with Ms. Millen, Minister Millen, have been very fruitful, extremely fruitful. The Premier spoke to them earlier. I think that we have all agreed that the airport is critically important to our national development, our economic independence and resilience. That is very important. And I am confident that we will have the sort of support that we need in order to develop the aerodrome.
And the airport master plan?
Well, we have been updated on the airport master plan. We are very excited about the airport master plan, and as time transpires, we will be able to grant more information as it relates to the airport master plan. But I think that it's a very exciting time for Anguilla, and I can't be happier to be part of an administration that is so forward-thinking and so progressive.
Yes, we know the Public Accounts Committee currently undergoing a number of inquiries. And
Sorry?
The Public Accounts Committee currently undergoing a number of inquiries. It was just revealed yesterday during the discussion with Mr. Hubbard that the dock, the St. Martin Anguilla dock, is under new ownership, and they have to meet with the owners as it relates to the future of the dock. Is there any comment you can give if we end up losing the dock?
Well, I didn't get an opportunity to listen to much of the Public Accounts Committee hearings, but I did listen in for 15 minutes on the day one, I believe it was, and I was very fascinated about the line. I don't want to call it attack, but the line that was taken towards the Anguilla St. Martin dock, because I can see that Anguilla St. Martin dock was something that we wanted to develop. I personally went to St. Martin on the behest of the Executive Council to meet with the Minister of Justice, Mr. Roland Duncan, and his advisor in the ministry, Ms. Ludmilla Duncan, who's now a Minister of Government in the government of St. Martin, to have discussions about the possibility of having Anguilla St. Martin dock in St. Martin, because when Anguilla shut its airport back in 2002, I believe it was, to redevelop the airport for the ATR 70, the American Eagle ATR 72, our tourists had to get to Anguilla. And the only way to get to Anguilla back then was through ocean. So we had difficulties and a lot of inconveniences, and that's the way the charter boat business really rose. But we had a lot of inconveniences because persons could take up to 3 hours to get from Princess Juliana International Airport to Blowing Point. And that was untenable. And this was especially during the season when the yacht crowd was into St. Martin because of the way it was. So when we came, after we appealed, when I was part of the hospitality sector at the time, and the government of the day, the Anguilla United Front, was not moving, not understanding the hospitality and what hospitality meant for Anguilla and what the product meant for Anguilla. When we came to office in 2010, the chairman of the tourist board at the time was Mr. Eustace Kishard, who was my general manager at Capchiluca Hotel. And one of the things that we say we had to do was develop this facility in order to have a smooth transit from St. Martin to Anguilla. And I am pleased to say that it cut down the time from 3 hours down to 20 minutes. But when we developed that dock, it could not be developed without the contributions of Starwood Capital at the time, which is now, we call it Four Seasons, Mr. Adam Aaron, who owned the Capchiluca Hotel at the time, and Mr. Leandro Risotto, who owned the Cuisinart. They made significant contributions to the Anguilla St. Martin dock because they understood the vision in where we wanted to go. We developed that dock, and we came under severe criticism, so much criticism that Governor Harrison wrote to the permanent secretary at the time, Foster Rogers, to conduct an investigation on me because I was so passionate about having this done. So, and I've always said that the results of that investigation should have been made public, because if it was that I was doing something that was shady, it would have been made public. So when you conduct investigations and there's nothing, it should be made public too. Your findings should be made public too. But that said, when the dock was destroyed on September 6, 2017, the first thing before we even built anything back in Anguilla, that if government who were in office at the time, who was critical of me and the government in between 2010 and 2015 for developing the dock, first thing that they did was built a dock, and we developed a dock in St. Martin,
Mr. Hughes,
2017.
during the PAC,
So,
no one was denying the importance of the dock, right? I mean,
Sorry?
I said during
Yes,
the PAC,
right,
no
right.
one denied the importance of the dock. Mr. Gishad spoke about the challenges before, but my question is,
Yes.
under new ownership, the board has to meet with the new owner, so I'm just wondering what is
I was getting to your
government's
question.
plan
There's
the dock in case
right.
we
We
end up
have we have
losing it.
options. We have options. We are, of course, is listening and having a discussion with the existing owners, but there's also other proposals that have been placed before the government of Anguilla and the Anguilla Tourist Board for Anguilla St. Martin Dock. So we're not worried about losing that facility at all, because I think there is a good partnership, and if that partnership expires, there's always other suitors that are ready and willing and able to take up that slack.
I'm mystified. I heard this on the radio yesterday. I thought that we owned that dock. We had put money into it and built it, etc. So how can it be sold to somebody else?
Because the land is not ours, the dock is not ours. We rent the space, we rent the dock. It is not owned by the government and people of Anguilla. It's rented.
The land, but the actual dock.
No, the dock is also owned
Yeah.
by the landowners in that particular area.
Oh, okay. Just a quick comment. I was pleased when you said from April the 5th, American Airlines is coming at 10:30. I don't know whether you were... that's what I meant, yes. I don't know whether you were aware, but on Monday, they left Miami at 8:30. I'm not sure what the reason was, but people from Washington and New York had to go to Miami and overnight in order to get it. And I figured that was not a good thing for our tourists. So is it definitely going to be 10:30?
Times that they have provided, yeah.
Thank you very much. We've had a long-spirited press conference today, maybe because it's Wednesday. And so we'll go back to Mondays starting next week. I want to thank you all for your participation, for the media, for the ministers, and all who've attended. For Dites, of course, that continues to work hard with us and always here. Thank you again. And, next Monday we look forward to having you. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless Anguilla. Thank you.